My reflection today is titled Communion with Flowers. Communion is defined by Oxford University as the sharing or exchanging of intimate thoughts and feelings, especially when the exchange is on a mental or spiritual level. Our congregation celebrates flower communion only once a year, which gives the day more weight and meaning in my mind. The exchange of flowers is one of the uniquely human ways we build and maintain relationships with each other. So our bringing flowers here today symbolizes that we are in community together to share our intimate thoughts and feelings on that spiritual level. Think back through your life on how flowers played a role in building your relationships. In elementary school, I wasn't too coordinated, and I shied away from double Dutch jump rope and basketball. But instead, I found a group of friends like me, and at recess, we were in communion with each other, weaving jewelry out of buttercups, clover, and dandelion flowers. Then, as a young adult, there is an entirely different feeling when a boyfriend or girlfriend gives you flowers. Did your stomach flutter when you received flowers for the first time? Were you nervous at giving flowers for the first time? I remember the first time my college sweetheart came to my door and gave me 24 deep red roses. And we enjoyed them by candlelight, sharing our feelings and thoughts for our future through a long talk over dinner in my tiny college apartment. Flowers can be shared between friends, between lovers, and also between grievers. Have any of you visited the Human Origins exhibit at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum? If you haven't, it's really a treat. Do you know which exhibit has stuck in my mind since the years I first saw it? It's the recreation of an ancient human burial where our most distant ancestors surrounded their loved one with flowers in a communion to mourn the death together. Another fantastic aspect of the Human Origins exhibit is the celebration of the diversity of humans across the world, while at the same time highlighting how similar we are socially and genetically. The flowers we bring today have such a variety of gifts. Some show off bright colors, some perfume the air, and some feed bees and birds. Every soul that walks through our doors at UUCR is celebrated for their diversity and the many gifts they bring into the world. A few years ago, a father visited me who loved his teenager, but could not wrap his mind around that his teen had a different gender identity than what was assigned at birth. His mind only understood 2 genders. Finally, somewhat out of frustration, I said to him, "Would you agree with me that there is tremendous diversity among flowers?" And he nodded. And I said, "Haven't you seen flowers that are not all red and not all white, but rather red streaked with white or white blushing with red?" I think there is just as much diversity among us humans, and this diversity is just as delightful as all the variations in flowers. Last month, I visited Hawaii for the first time. And I was amazed by the diversity of flowers on the islands. I saw cocoa flowers no bigger than a baby's fingernail, and that would grow into a chocolate pod. I also saw feather-like strands of macadamia flowers, and each of those little feather tips is going to turn into a macadamia nut, and hibiscus flowers as big as dinner plates. But what impressed me more was how the spirit of aloha is symbolized through flower leis. Aloha is the essence of being: love, peace, compassion, and a mutual understanding of respect. Aloha means living in harmony with the people and land around you with mercy, sympathy, grace, and kindness. In Hawaii, flower leis are presented in the spirit of aloha and worn for all special occasions, and for no occasion at all other than to enjoy the beauty and fragrance. When presented with a lei, it's customary to receive a kiss on the cheek or a hug, and it's taboo to refuse or take off that lei. What would our lives be like here if we showed the spirit of aloha through giving more kisses, more hugs, and more flowers to each other? As we exchange flowers today, we are in communion with Unitarian Universalists everywhere. We are showing our commitment to building stronger relationships with each other by bringing our true selves to our community. And we celebrate the diversity that brings delight into our world.
Hello. You know, I'm the type that writes these things and then changes it every day until I get here, and sometimes I even change it then. First, I want to say that when it comes to flowers, my ancestry is a long line of farmers and beekeepers. So we look at flowers as kind of a functional cog in the way that this whole world goes around. And with that in mind, it's the time of year for flowers to take center stage. Who doesn't like flowers? They're pretty, colorful, and they smell good, which is all helpful when it comes to propagation. I'm always struck by the similarities between plants and humans. Whenever I see a young couple out on a date, they follow the same path as flowers. They dress up pretty, they put on cologne or perfume. Also, they can be more attractive for their intended. It's so they can generate the magnetism that in the long run may lead to propagation and maybe even babies. Although where plants and people diverge is that plants require insects to help them propagate. When it comes to insects and people, that's a hard no. I've always been interested in gardening and in propagation of plants. The lovely Anne Marie and I have been married for 40 years as of last month. And I can mark that I've been gardening that long because we bought our house as soon as we got married, and I was so excited because I couldn't wait to plant apples, apple trees. And when I researched it, I found out you can't just buy one apple tree, you have to buy two. One with male flowers and one with female flowers. Well, who knew? So I planted them, and you got to get them close together so they can cross-pollinate and bear fruit. And I've learned through the years of gardening that different plants have different gender situations with their flowers. You can just look inside the flower and then see if it has a stamen or a pistil or both. Zucchini squash plants, for instance, have both male and female flowers all on the same plant, quite different from the apple trees. And once again, who knew? An old farmer once showed me how to look inside the flowers on a squash plant and find the male flower and the female flower. He would take the male flower and pick it, and he'd peel off the petals, and he'd go find the female plants, and he would dab them all on their pistils with pollen. I got to talking, I stopped reading. Oh, he said he did it so he wouldn't have to depend on insects. All I know is he had a lot of zucchinis. There are technical terms. It's interesting that Adrian came in and started reading technical terms, but for these gender situations, I looked it up, and the apple trees, since you need two plants, are dioecious. The di is the prefix, it means two, meaning two trees. Now the squash plant is monoecious. It starts with a mono because there's one plant with multiple genders of flowers. However, some plants have both male and female parts inside the one flower. One-stop shopping. The technical term for them, and I'm not making this up, this is a horticultural term, is perfect. How cool is that? I love this terminology, and I think that those people that like to involve themselves in other people's gender decisions and issues should take up gardening. It might help them temper their judgment on gender things, maybe open up their minds and even their hearts to the fact that people can be different and have multiple sides and everything and still be perfect. Now, tomato plant flowers are perfect. They have the stamen and the pistils all in the same. And I just love when we get flowers, watching a big old fat bumblebee try and squeeze his way into those skinny little flowers. And that's part of the pleasure of gardening. You get to see these things. He gets inside and gets to work and starts buzzing and buzzing. And you could say he's getting busy. So I had to get a dad joke in, sorry. Now, I've read that commercial tomato growers sometimes assign people to go down through the tomato plants when they're blooming with an electric toothbrush and vibrate the flowers. Now that's the job I want when I retire. And I imagine I would make a buzzing sound while I'm doing it, although I'm sure that's optional. I have to admit my favorite part of gardening is watching the pollinators, flies, bees, hornets, and wasps. The best plant I've found to attract them all is mountain mint, if you're familiar with it. If you want to plant it in your yard, contain it. Put it in a container or a raised bed, because it is prolific. It will take over. And when it flowers, it emits a wonderful minty smell that drives the insects just bonkers. Hundreds of pollinators swarm and circle when the flowers, come and start smelling. I find it mesmerizing mesmerizing, to watch the circling, frenetic throb of insect activity and to reflect on the reckless precision of life. Or is it the precise recklessness of life? Something to ponder. This is one of the reasons my garden is my happy place. Thank you.
This is the 100th year anniversary of the Flower Communion. It all started, as you may know, with Norman Čapek, who was born in Prague. He grew up in troubled times in Europe. During World War I, his safety was threatened because he spoke out against those who tried to restrict freedom of worship. So Norbert and his wife came to America, where Norbert discovered Unitarianism and became a Unitarian minister, as did his wife. Once the First World War ended, Reverend Norbert wanted to return and share his love of Unitarianism with the people of his country, which was now the newly created country of Czechoslovakia. He returned to the city of Prague in 1921 and started a brand new church. But the war had left many miseries and a hard life for the people in Prague. Families had been broken up, businesses ruined, and many of his congregants did not have enough money for food or to have warm clothing. They were trying to rebuild, but it was such a difficult time. Reverend Čapek knew that during hard times, people needed something special to hang on to, and he wanted to create a religious ritual that would bind his diverse community of people together in hope and care. I'm sure we've all probably had the experience of walking through a park or down a street and suddenly we find ourselves in the presence of some lovely flowers. Perhaps you turn a corner and there's a window box or a pot of flowers or a garden in front of you. We presume that Reverend Čapek had a similar experience, and the rest, as they say, is history. This consecration of the flowers is adapted from Reverend Sarah Movius Schur. And I'd like to say that we have so many flowers here. If you didn't bring any, don't worry about it. Just when the time comes, please come up and take one. Even several. These flowers come in many shades and colors. They come in many sizes and shapes, yet all were created by the same miracle. The miracle that these blossoms grow every year out of the divine mixing of earth, air, wind, sunshine, soil. Our lives are miracles as well. In a moment, as Justin plays some lovely music for us, which actually was composed for the 100th anniversary of the Flower Communion, exactly, I'm going to say, please rise as you are moved, going to the center aisle and going up toward the back and then down around the sides to the tables in the front to choose a flower for yourself. We want to say that you're all welcome here and all may equally give and receive in this congregation. If moving around is a difficulty, please raise your hand and we will bring a flower to you. Each year, we celebrate Flower Communion to be a part of something greater than ourselves. And now, we will let you do it. Flowers are a miracle, and our lives are miracles as well. Despite our trials and disappointments, people come every year to celebrate Flower Communion. We come to be a part of something greater than ourselves. We come to be reminded that all of us have value and all have a place in the beauty of the world. We come to be reminded that where you came from is not as important as the fact that you are here now. We come to be a part of something greater than ourselves. Amen and blessed be. I hear that the picnic tables are now placed in the shade of those trees behind the buildings there behind the pergola. By the way, there is going to be way too much food, so if you didn't bring anything, it doesn't matter, just stay and eat. This is good. And there shall be tours of the children's garden happening during the picnic. Yes, we'll be very excited. So, in benediction today, yes, both kinds of hot dogs. There's a lot of veggie hot dogs. They are. Our benediction today is called Let Our Lives Be a Prayer, and it's by Joel Miller. Let our lives be a prayer that waters dry souls, mends broken hearts, refuses to be terrorized, seeks this world's beauty, and carries us through its storms. Blessed be. Amen.